Hello, hi guys. Can you see me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I think I'm pronouncing your name right. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, Thibaut. That's just Thibaut.
Okay, because I was actually Googling it. I wasn't too sure. But that's a
Yeah, no
relief.
worries.
Okay, so Thibaut, you're going to be here with us for the next 45 minutes, and you can go ahead and start your screen. So guys, he's going to be speaking for 30 minutes, and the last 15 minutes were reserved for your Q&A.
Awesome. Yeah, that works for me. All right. So let me share my screen. Um,
Right off the bat, Thibaut, you already have compliments in the chat box. Someone just wrote there, wow, Thibaut was so handsome.
okay. Well, I'm experimenting all the time. All right. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I believe we can. Guys, if you can see your screen, just go ahead and tell us, yes, we can see your screen. But I think, people, you can go right ahead and begin. And I'll see you in 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Okay?
Awesome. Excellent.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. It's great to be here. So yeah, today we're going to talk about rapid experimentation in marketing. It's a subject that I love. So let me get started. Just a few words about myself. So I'm the founder of Growth Marketing Studio. First, let's connect. I love talking about marketing and digital marketing and growth, etc. So you have my email, my WhatsApp, my LinkedIn. Use whatever you like, but just connect with me. I started as a developer. I'm a developer by training. I did that for like 7, 8 years, and then I moved to marketing, and I've been in marketing for 15 years. I worked in startups, in corporates. So the startups are all dead. I know it's a pretty impressive track record, and the corporates are companies like Cisco or Nokia. I do a lot of mentoring for Google for Startups, Startup Singapore, NTU here in Singapore. I'm based in Singapore, by the way. French initially, if that matters. And I'm also a community builder. So I'm one of the board members of La French Tech here in Singapore, which is pro bono community of French startups and entrepreneurs. All right. So I know the theme of the event is marketing in a post-pandemic world. My view is that we're actually not behind the crisis. So the crisis is still going on. It will be with us with many more months. That's my belief. You might disagree with that, but that's what I strongly believe. So there's three things I think that are very important. So we're in a completely new market. So whatever happened in the past, whatever matrix you have in the past, whatever products and offerings and market segments you were addressing in the past, this has all changed. So customers have changed, the whole dynamic has changed, and what was true before, there's basically no reason why it should be true again today. Some of the markets will die. I know that we might think that it's a temporary situation, but first, this temporary situation has been going on for 6 months now, so it starts to be, pretty long time. So anyway, the past is the past, and most of it is gone, and that's the first thing that we have to be very clear about. Now, the second point is that we can't predict what's going to happen. If you and you probably have tried to monitor what happened in the past month, every country, every industry, every company, every region is very, very different. So there's a whole divergence in the way people and countries and industries react to the crisis. So you can't think about, okay, how is the retail industry? Or how is, I don't know, South Korea or Indonesia doing? Because for every country, you really need to take a deep dive in order to understand what's going on. And there's no way you can predict what's going to happen. Some countries are reopening, some other are going back in lockdown, etc. So it's super hard. So we can't predict anything. So then the third thing is that there's only now that matters. What happens now is the only thing that matters. We need to have very, very short cycles. And when it comes to marketing, if you have like even a 3-month planning, it's going to fall apart because you have no idea what's going to happen in 3 months. It's just the hard truth. Now you might disagree, and it's always, as always, it's to what extent is this true? Maybe, in 2 months, this is all gone and we're fine. I might be wrong, right? But right now we have no idea. So there's only one thing we can take action today upon, and which is, if you want to sort of have an operating model for your business, for your startup, whatever, the only thing that matters is to be experimenting constantly. That's the only option. I'm pretty extreme about it, but it's been this theory about growth and experimentation has been around for many years, but now it's really the only option. So my goal is to sort of make that point and try and provide you some simple steps to go about growth, even if you're not Amazon or Facebook, let's say. So why do you want to do rapid experimentation is really to remove the uncertainty. Whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that at least you will learn from it. You run an experimentation because you want to learn something. So you make a test. Maybe it's going to fail, but at least you will learn from this experiment. So that's the first thing, right? You want to learn as fast as you can. Speed really matters. I'll come back to that, but especially today, if you run an experimentation that's going to last 3 months, there's no point. 3 months is way too long. So you need to run an experiment of 2 weeks to a month maximum, and you need to constantly adjust. Again, because the market conditions change constantly, and it's true from what people want, how people feel. Sometimes people were pretty stressed during the first phase of the lockdowns. And then, like in Europe, for instance, many countries are sort of, they have eased the lockdown. So people are kind of, very enthusiastic. And then, in the past 10 days, there's a lot of discussion about, new second wave. So people are getting stressed again. So you need to monitor these things. So you need to have short cycles, 2 weeks to 1 month. It's super, super important. So when it comes to experimentation, what kind of questions do you want to answer with rapid experimentations? There's a whole range of things you can test. You might know about A/B testing, changing the color, testing the colors or the colors of a button on your site, or the text of a call to action. Yes, that is experimentation. We're going to talk about that, but these are not the thing that matter the most for most businesses. So the questions you can test really are, do I still have product market fit? If you're a startup and you had product market fit before, you might not have product market fit anymore because the market has completely changed. Okay, so you need to test these sort of things. If you want to launch new offers, well, what offers should you be launching? Again, experimentation is key to launch the right offers. How do I find new acquisition channel? There's a battle at the moment for to reach new customers. And so, how do you acquire more customers? How do you find new acquisition channels, et cetera, et cetera? So the list go on and on. Basically, you can really test everything and run experimentations on anything. So don't take my word for it. So I just took 3 examples. Obviously, this whole experimentation and growth as a discipline has been around for, I think the first time was 2006. And it's been, the whole theory has been built by all the tech startups. So I took the examples of Airbnb, Amazon, and Facebook. So 3 years ago, like in 2017, Lindsay Pettingill, which is a data scientist at the growth team of Airbnb, she was saying that we were running fewer than 100 experiments in a given week. We're now running about 700 experiments every week, 700 per week. Amazon, so Jeff Bezos, our success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, per week, and per day. And Facebook, at any given point in time, there isn't just one version of Facebook running, there's probably 10,000. So that gives you an idea of how experimenting is really critical if you want to grow your business. Now, my point is that you can do it too. Yes, this has been theorized by like the big giants, or companies who are now giant companies, but you can do it too. And that's what I'm going to try and break down for you. So the first thing to understand is that it's actually about a very simple process, and it's about discipline as well. And that's the whole challenge. Knowing the process is fine. Understanding why you want to do that, it's also easy to understand, but you really need to have the discipline to run this process over and over again. So first, you need to ideate. Try to have as many ideas as you can that you could test. That's the first phase. Then you want to prioritize these ideas. Then you want to define the experiment. So for sort of the winner, so the ideas that you actually want to test, you need to really sort of be scientific about how you're going to test them. And then you need to run this test, again, as fast as you can, and then you analyze. So there's a 5-step process. It's fairly simple. And then obviously the challenge is that you have to rinse and repeat constantly, again, with a weekly, bi-weekly cadence. And that's the challenge, trying to have the discipline to run this process very fast. That's the whole challenge. But basically the process is simple. And you can do this with a Google spreadsheet. So there's no reason why, even if you're a small business, you can't do it today. So I'm just going to try and dive a little bit into each of the 5 steps. So the first one, the ideation step, it is a super important step because when you experiment, it becomes really kind of the operating model for your marketing team and actually for the whole company. I'm going to come back to that. So it means that anybody in the company should be able to propose ideas to test, okay? And the ideas can be can sound very stupid sometimes, like, how about the whole team goes on, Orchard Road on a Saturday afternoon dressed as pandas and try to, take selfies with people and leveraging, some hashtag and try to go viral on Instagram, whatever ideas you have. Yes, it might sound stupid, but maybe it's going to work. So involve everybody in the team at the ideation phase. Anybody in the company can have ideas, the young, the old, the guys in the CEO, the developers, the guys in marketing, in product sales, etc. So involve everybody. Anybody in the company must be able to input some of the ideas that they have. It's super, super important. No stupid idea. Again, there's nobody at this stage has the mandate to say, no, that's a stupid idea, so we're not going to add it to the list of ideas we want to run, right? No stupid idea. There's some structured way to go about ideation that you can use and that you should be using. So there's one called mindstorming. I'm not going to dive into that. I'll let you Google that. But basically, it's you try to force yourself to come up with 20, 50, 100 ideas in 1 hour. So you sit down for 1 hour and you try to have as many ideas as you want. And basically, you don't want to stop until you have 50 ideas. And when you have this sort of very time-boxed approach to ideation, you will see that you're actually able to do that. Remove biases, so it's very, very important, and that it comes down to the fact you want to involve everyone as well, because the more diverse the team that contributes to the ideation process, the more ideas you're going to have, and the more diverse the ideas, the more chances of success you have. So try to remove the biases, and this is why it really needs to be a team effort, and diversity matters. And you need to make a habit, right? So there's no, I think about it when I have time or whatever. It's part of the process. So it's like a weekly discipline that you need to have in your agenda, whatever, but make it a habit to think, stop and think, just go have a walk and think about what could I be testing for the business. So that's the first thing.
Just to cut in right here. I'm sorry, we're just getting a little bit of feedback here that you are actually breaking up a little bit. So would it be okay if you turned off your video? Maybe we can improve the bandwidth that way.
Sure.
It's towards the left of your screen. You actually muted yourself. It's the other button. You have to unmute yourself as well. I can still see. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
So that should be okay. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. Sorry about that, guys. So ideation, super, super important. Prioritization. Now, obviously, once you have all these ideas, you want to prioritize them because there's no way you can test everything. And so the way to prioritize is you sort of need to have a framework to compare all of these ideas, right? And you want to have sort of scientific framework, so semi-scientific, obviously, but you need to have a very strict framework and a data framework to assess all of these ideas. So there's one that you should be using. It's called the ICE framework. And there's basically three criteria you want to assess every ID by. So one is the impact, right? So how impactful do I expect these tests to be? I think that's with this experiment, we can have like a direct impact on the revenue, whatever. So there's going to be an impact on the company that can be pretty dense. The second aspect is confidence. So you start with a level of confidence on the test. So that's why I was saying that it's a semi-scientific, obviously it's a gut feel. So there's no right or wrong, but basically you try and assess, how confident you are that the test will actually be successful. And then the third thing is how easy is it to run this test? If you want to be like a huge experiment, back to my stupid example of having everybody dressed as panda in Orchard, it's pretty easy to do. If you want to, I don't know, completely, revamp your site, that's a complex project. That is very, very different. So impact, confidence, and score and ease, that's your ICE framework, your ICE framework. And basically you do the average of all of the scores. And you measure, with a score of 1 to 10 on each dimension. And the average is your global ICE score. And this is how you rank all of the IDs. So if you have a backlog of, I don't know, 200, 300 IDs, you rank and you don't question the process or whatever. You have to go with the flow and go with the process. You start by building the highest ranking ID, turning the highest ranking IDs into experiments. So once you have your IDs, you prioritize the IDs, then okay, so the best IDs, you need to what I call define. You need to define these experiments. Once you have an ID, you need to be very concrete and put this into something that's actionable. So you need to clearly state a hypothesis in a way that can be proved or disproved. Okay, so back to my example, like the experiment could be, I think that if we go dressed as pandas with 5 people during Saturday afternoon on our road for 5 hours, I don't know, we can gain 500 followers on our Instagram account. That's something that can be measurable, and you have everything is time boxed, everything has numbers on it. So that's an hypothesis, right? You don't know if it's right or wrong, and you have to draw lines in the sand, right? You don't know if 500 is a realistic number. Maybe it's not, but at least you need to have a baseline and then grab it, right? So state your hypothesis, it's super important. Then how you're going to verify it, right? What is the sort of the unique factor that is going to be used to say, yes, we have been successful, or no, we haven't been successful. You need to choose the metric you're going to use to know if you're successful or not. So is it, more followers? Is it more revenue? Is it, number of signups, conversion rate increase on your ads, whatever that is? You need to have the one metric you're going to look at. And then you need to have the baseline. What is the metric today before the experiment? And then what is the success condition? So what do you think the metric will be after the end of the experiment if you want this experiment to be successful, right? So it's kind of a simple process. You don't need to make it complex, but you need to have this state of defining. And then the next step is just do the work, right? Now you have all of your conditions that have been defined, etc. Now is the time to run. So you need to, usually there's a bit of work to do that. So you need to set up the tracking, because again, you need to measure. So you need to set up the tracking. You need to capture your baseline. So a pretty common mistake. I've made it myself sometimes. You run an experiment and you realize, oh, I forgot to measure before, so you don't have anything to try, capture your baseline, and then you need to create some of the assets, to create some landing pages, create some email sequences. You need to basically for it, so the whole thing should be implied, and then just before you launch, just double check everything. Trust me, it can be a messy process. I'll come back to that, but you have to really double check that everything's in place. If you're tracking okay, if you have all the aspects of ready, etc. Before you actually run the experiment. And once you have all that, you just start running the experiment. And then the last step of the process is once you run the experiment, you need to analyze it. So the first point I want to make is that you need to have a very defined period for the test. Because whatever business you're in, even if you're in e-commerce or businesses that can have very short cycle, the days of the weekend behavior of your consumers is not the weekdays. So have cycles, test cycles of 1 week at least, and don't go above 1 month because then it's going to take too long, right? So end the test on the 2 days. And after like a few days, it looks really successful. So you're like, oh, we're going to make it. And there's a natural tendency to say, okay, let's just stop the test because it's successful. It's not true. You never know what can happen until the end of the test. So we run the test up until the end. And then when it comes to analysis, it's super, super important to spend the time on the data, etc., and really understand what's going on. I guess there's a natural human tendency to say, okay, yeah, awesome. The test is, we're done. So the work is done. And you just have a look at the metrics. If you did your job properly, you have the metric, you have like the threshold you should be looking at, and if you hit it or not. And if you don't, you just stop. If it was a good test, you can run it again. Most of the time, it's not
Thibaut,
as simple as that.
It's me again.
Yeah.
I think in regards to the sound, it's still breaking up though. So would it be okay if you checked your network and your microphone if you have any, because we're still finding it a little bit difficult to hear you.
Okay. Let me run a test.
Yeah, a speed test, please.
So the network is fine on my end, it seems.
Oh, is it?
Test. Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, things go well after this. I don't suppose you have an Ethernet cable you can just plug into your laptop, by any chance?
No, I don't have that right now.
Oh,
but
okay, all right.
Yeah, I just want to test, and it says that the bandwidth is okay, so I'm not sure it's the network.
Okay, it's a little strange, but I guess all we can do is just hope that this doesn't continue. But please, sorry, continue where you left off. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so analysis. Really spend the time to understand all of the results that you have. I would say one rule is to trust your gut feel. I know we want to have like a scientific process, but sometimes you're going to have a gut feel that something's off. And if that's the case, you should really spend the time to investigate and really dive into the data to understand what's going on. It's really, really super, super important. Compare to your baseline, right? And log everything. You need to really make sure that you have the history of all of the tests that you have run and what the data was. Because oftentimes you will run these tests again, maybe 6 months down the road or whatever. So you need to capture everything, all of the data about your test. So how do you manage this process very concretely? this is a step-by-step instruction, really. So there's no reason for you not to do it. Again, it can be a messy process, but it's simple to set up and to get started at least. The first point is to identify who is your growth master. So you're a person who will be in charge of the process, making sure that the process is actually running smoothly, that everybody knows what they have to do, etc. So you need a person in charge. That's one. And it takes a lot of time. So these guys should be really dedicated to that. The second thing is to hold, I like to hold my growth meeting every morning. The first thing you do in the morning every week is have the growth meeting. So you try and go through all of the ideas that you have, decide which one you're going to test, and then try to sort of frame your ideas very basically on how you're going to run the test. And then at the end of the test, everybody knows that, okay, this week we will choose this ID and we're going to test it. Okay, so everybody knows that they will be involved and that they're going to have something to do, right? It's like a 1 hour meeting, you try to keep it simple, but it's very important that you get into this habit of weekly growth meeting. And then you need to manage your, what I call the experiment board. And you can do that in Google Sheets, in Trello, Notion, whatever tool you want. The tool doesn't really matter. Google Sheet is perfectly fine. And so I'm taking, I took a snapshot of the Reforge experiment board. There's basically 7 steps. So the backlog is all of your IDs, right? You list all of the IDs. The queue is the IDs that you're actually going to test at some point. Okay, so the ones that you've prioritized. Schedule to launch is the ones that people are actually preparing at the moment. So maybe they're creating some assets, landing page, whatever. So these IDs are being worked on and prepared at the moment. In progress is the test is actually live, so it's running right now. Analyze is the test is over, and now we're analyzing the results. Winners, all of the tests, and this is where you want to keep track of what works and what doesn't. So once you have analyzed your test and you know that it's a winner or a loser, you put them in one of the categories, winners or losers. So it's a simple thing, really. 7 columns in your Google spreadsheet. It's not very hard. Again, the difficulty of that is really to keep the discipline of running the process on a weekly basis. You need to measure the process itself. So how many experiments you're running every week, how many successful experiments do you have, how many losers do you have, etc. You need to keep track of these numbers to measure progress. But basically, the process, that's what it is. There's nothing more than that. So any kind of business you're in, any size of company you're in, you can actually apply this process. Now, let me do a quick check time here. All right. Some of the tools and frameworks you can use to run the experiments. I wanted to make this slide because there's a lot of confusion out there on between experimenting and A/B testing. So yes, A/B testing. So A/B testing is like, I don't know, when you want to test 2 versions of your landing pages, changing the copy, for instance. You basically create 2 versions and you split your traffic between these 2 versions and you see the one that converts better. That's A/B testing. So it's great, it works really well. The thing is that it is really for high volume websites or apps. And the thing that many people don't realize is that for most businesses, you don't have enough traffic or enough conversion to actually run A/B testing in a way that is meaningful. So yes, you're going to get some data, but if you have 100 visitors a day, these results might be completely biased, right? So the results that you're going to get can be completely flawed, and the last thing you want to have is flawed results. So A/B testing is great, but if you're like the Lazadas of the world, yeah, perfect. They do a lot of A/B testing. If you have like a small business, a site that doesn't have a lot of traffic, don't bother doing A/B testing. That's not the right thing for you. But there's other ways you can use. So one is user testing. So it's really putting your website or app in the hands of users and see how they use it. You can do it manually, so actually inviting people and then just pulling up your website and saying nothing, but just looking at them, watching them using your website. You can also use sites such as usertesting.com, where you can actually you pay this website small amount. It's not too expensive. And then you get the feedback from actual users, and then you can scale and have like 1,000 users providing you feedback on your website. So user testing, you don't need a lot of traffic for that. You're going to have pretty good results. Mouse tracking, there's a lot of tools out there that you can use to actually know how people interact with your site and build a heat map of where they click, etc. It's very interesting. Again, there's tools to do that. Use your session replays. So here with these kind of services, you actually record physically how people use your website. So you can see them, you can see where they click, but you can also see them talk about the website and what they think. Oh, that's not very clear to me what I should be doing, for instance. This is user session replays, very, very insightful. And then the last thing, which is actually the most important, interview your users, invite your users and have conversation with them. There's two books that I love, Running Lean and Sprint. So Running Lean by Ash Moria and Sprint by Jake Knapp. I'm sure there's summaries of this book online. So just you don't need to run to buy this book, but go and read the summaries. You have like scripts as part of this book that you can use to interview your users and customers to understand how they're using your sites or mobile apps. So these four bullet points are things you can test right now, whatever the size of your business. So there's no excuse for you not to do it. Just get on board and do it. Especially for smaller businesses, there's really a number of things you should be looking at. There's which is what's called the heuristics of your website. So it's really the clarity. So for every web page of your site, you should really assess all of these elements. So the clarity, is the value proposition, your offer, and the next step clear enough? And is it above the fold, right? So that's one. Second, the friction. Are you really trying to remove all of the frictions? So the questions and concerns and the trust that the trust issues that the users might have when they look at your website. Did you really make all you could to remove all of this friction? Super, super important. Distractions, so remove anything that does not really directly contribute to users taking the desired action on this page. Anything that's moving or blinking, whatever, just remove that. You don't need that. Urgency, so try to create some sense of urgency so that the users actually take action. User experience, so people coming to a page, maybe they came through SEO, through an ad, through whatever it is, through a newsletter. You need to make sure that the experience is consistent across that. And buying phases, right? If you are on a pricing page, people on this page are probably very, low in the funnel, right? So you can be somehow more aggressive. If you're on a different page where you're sort of just talking about the problem, well, don't push people to buy. It's not the right time. So be very clear about the buying phases and try to bring the right value at the right time for your users. All of these things, these are things you can test right now using the tools that we just saw previously, and there's no reasons you cannot do that. Just I'm just going to end with some best practices and worst practices. So best practices involve the whole team. So marketing, product, sales, involve the whole team in your company. Up your game in data and analytics. The truth is that there's a lot of gap here in the education system even, but there's a lot of people who don't really know how to manipulate data, etc. Knowing what to measure, leading metrics versus lagging metrics, for instance, you need to really up your game in this space. Keep going. I know I can tell you that the process, when you implement this process in a company, at first it feels very weird and kind of messy, but you have to keep going because you will get better at it, right? In the first place, you're not really sure what you're doing. It's kind of a bumpy road. Just continue, keep going. You will get better at it. Best practices, double check your tracking. It's very, very common to forget about the tracking or set it up incorrectly so that you actually can't really measure the whole performance of the test. Build a test plan. So what do you want to test? What are the priorities? Who does what, etc. as part of the test? Because the speed matters, and without a plan, you're going to fail. That's a sure thing. Test variations at the same time. If you want to test different variants of one thing, just test them at the same time because the conditions change. So if you test one version during 2 weeks, for instance, and then another version the next 2 weeks, you can't compare. I've seen that a lot, but you can't compare the results. Set a proper test duration. If you have a sales cycle that's usually a week, well, keep your test a week. But if you have a sales cycle of 6 months, there's not much interest in running like week-long tests. Know your exact goals. Sometimes if you run A/B tests typically on one specific page or ad, you can have a higher click-through rate on an ad, for instance. But sometimes the people who actually click on the ads, maybe more of them will take action after that. So I've had like many examples of you click an ad and then the click-through is lower on the variant 1. It's higher on the variant B, so you can think that the variant B is the winner, but actually the number of app installs that you have on the variant B is lower. Okay, so maybe the click-through rate is higher, but then the overall app install is lower, and vice versa. So you need to be very clear on what is your end goal. Monitor your test in real time. When you run tests, you don't just run the test and let it be and then come back at the end of your test like 2 weeks or 1 month. That's not how it works. You need to constantly monitor the test because usually this is how you can detect that there's problems of tracking, etc. Talk to other professionals. It's super important. Usually people who are really strong on experimentation, they love to share things. I love to do that. So just reach out to me, reach out to other people to talk about testing, etc. Trust your gut feel. I mentioned that before. Then some of the worst practices, declare victory too early. I mentioned that. Even if a test looks promising, don't stop it. Let it go until the end. You might have surprises. Worst practice, not have a baseline. So you don't know what the previous results were. Worst practice, analyze results in isolation. This is a team sport, so always work with the team to ideate, etc., and analyze the results. Don't let one person judge if a test was successful or not. Don't run too many tests during like a peak period. So typically if you're in e-commerce during Black Friday, it's not the right time to run many tests, right? Just, get your shit together, be super solid at that time and run the test in other periods. Don't test too many things at once. Don't ignore the results. I've seen that. I constantly see that. You run tests, the results say, okay, so this is a loser. And then some people say, yeah, but we didn't really take that into account, so maybe we should run it again. No, you made a test. The result is, not successful. Just move on. Don't. So let me have a look at the conversation. Questions are coming in. Okay, awesome. So don't change your paid ads campaign while you run tests. Again, that's a common mistake. Usually when you run ads, there's a weekly cadence in terms of, you change the ads, you change the copy, you change the audience, whatever it is. But if you do that, then the test obviously cannot be measured because there will be change and variations in your traffic and your conversions because you changed the campaigns, right? So all of the changes and variations in the metrics for your test, you will not be able to know what is the result of the change in your paid ad structure versus your test itself. So try to keep your paid campaigns as they are while you run a test. Or you have to be like a really superhero in tracking to be able to slice and dice it. But my recommendation is try to keep things stable on the paid ad fronts while you're running your test. Don't assume things. sometimes the whole team's like, yeah, we don't even need to run this test. It's obvious. Like people will, nobody will want that. And sometimes you just run the test and you actually where you realize that people want this or did not want it. But don't assume things. And then the worst thing is to go, sort of stop in the middle when you want to go about experimentation. Don't do half-baked testing. If you want to go in testing, and you should be doing, you have to go all in. If you start, if you do a little bit of testing and then, after like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like, yeah, but, I don't really have time to do this because I need to manage the Facebook ads campaigns, whatever. That's not going to work. And everybody's going to conclude, yeah, testing is not for us. It doesn't work. And trust me, I've worked with many companies doing that. You need to be pretty, that's a commitment to testing that you need to make. Right, so that's all for me. Again, let's chat. You have my WhatsApp, email, whatever, connect on LinkedIn. Just, let me know what you think. And yeah, let me know if you want to have a conversation about that.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Thibaut. Let's give him a virtual round of applause, everyone. I thought it was a very wholesome presentation. Thibaut, why don't you just join me on screen right now because we're going to be moving to the Q&A session. You can turn on your webcam again. And okay, so we have a question. I think let's tackle the one in the comments first. I'm afraid I will get lost. So this one is from Alex Farsi. Now, Alex is actually one of our speakers today as well. He tuned in bright and early. Hey, Alex, thank you for the question. And the question is, if CTR is high and CPC is low, but then conversions are low in the test A, if conversions are low in the test A, and in test B, it's the opposite, conversions are higher, but CTR is lower than the CPC, CTR is lower and CPC is higher, what conclusions could you make out of such behavior?
Oh my God! All right, so if CTR is high, so what are we talking about first off? What are you measuring? Like organic traffic, paid traffic, these sort of things? Can you give me a little bit of
leads?
Okay. So then conversions are low on the test A and test B opposite. So sometimes, and so as I understand the question, I think that's a common situation. So sometimes you run a test and you realize it's a winner or it's a loser, and there's actually 5% that will be winners, 5% that will be clear losers, but there's a whole bunch of tests that it's not very clear if it's a winner or loser. So sometimes you have to run another test to sort of take it deeper. And I think that's what you should be doing here. And the key thing to me is to start from the bottom of your funnel. So start really on the conversion phase. If you have traffic coming in from your two variants, you need to first start from what converts and what doesn't convert, and then work backwards. Understand really what is the conversion act for the people who actually convert, and try to run tests. Again, and you need to take an extreme approach when that's the case, because what you want, again, you don't want to get dragged into tests that you sort of carry on over and over again. So at some point, if you have a situation where you're not sure, you need to run a second test. Start from the lower part of your funnel, really from conversions before traffic, etc. Don't look at your costs in the first place, just look at the conversions, and run kind of extreme tests so that at least it's so extreme that you will have sort of a clearer winner. That would be my advice, to sort of investigate that. But yeah, testing, it's about investigation. So, and that's kind of, as I said, that's why it's a weekly discipline. Especially for these kind of issues right now during COVID, that's why testing matters, because it's very hard to answer these specific questions with just one test.
Okay, thank you for the question. Our next question is, what metric would you suggest to track and measure product market fit? Is it just a number of customers?
Nope, it is not a number of customers. You can have customers and totally not have product market fit. So basically, you need to make sure one common way of doing that is you want to make sure that people stay with you, right? Typically, if you're a SaaS business, so a subscription-based business, you want to monitor your retention rate, and you want your retention rate to become flat at some point. So it's kind of, it's a little technical. I don't know. Hope everybody's fine with that. But you need to do your cohort analysis. So if people subscribe on a given, like today, and then after 1 month, maybe, I don't know, 20% of them have left or they're not using the product. And then maybe after 2 months, another 15% left your service. Whatever, you're going to have your retention rate that's going to have a specific curve, right? If even after 6 months, 8 months, a year, you still have subscribers leaving your service, that means that you don't have product market fit. What you want is to make sure that even if it's after 6 months, at least you know that after 6 months, my retention rate is stabilized at like 25%. Okay, so somebody who subscribed today, after 6 months, there's 1 chance out of 4 that he will still be a subscriber, right? So you know that all of the acquisition work that you're doing right now, at least 25% of these guys will be subscribers after 6 months, and that's when you can actually invest in paid ads. But that's one way to measure product market fit. And then it's asking the questions as well. There's processes that you can use to actually ask the question to your users. How would you feel if you would not have access to our service anymore, for instance? You're trying again to be extreme, and you take the extremes, and you want to have a certain percentage, like 30, 40% of people who would feel bad if they would not have access to your service anymore.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I think that's a very good question. We're running a little bit short of time, but I think we can squeeze in another 2 more because we had a little bit of technical issues just now. So this next one comes from Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth is asking, could you share more about the buying phase and the researching phase and some indications or data and tools to help us understand it?
So the buying phase is really kind of if I may, so there's the concept of funnel, right? I'm assuming you're familiar with the concept of funnel. So you have the pyramid funnel where you have the 5 stages, from awareness, acquisition, etc., down to revenue and referral. If I try to make it simple and take only 3 phases, like there's people, they don't even know that a problem exists. So they have a problem and they're trying to get their arms around it, right? So these guys, you need to talk about the problem, right? Then the second phase, you need to let them know that there are solutions to this problem, because sometimes we have a problem and I don't even know that I can actually solve the problem. Okay, so the second phase is actually talk about the various solutions that you have available to you to fix this problem. And then the third phase is actually, okay, now if you want to choose a solution, obviously you want to make sure that people know that you are the best in the market, whatever, but it's really about making a choice. These 3 phases, these 3 buying phases are very, very different. In the first place, you're really trying to educate your prospect on the problem. So you're not even talking about your products, etc. You're just trying to provide value and help people really understand the problem. Why it's a problem, what are the side effects of the problem, how much time you waste with that, etc. So sometimes people don't even realize that they have a problem. So they need to be able to identify themselves with this. So it's really about copywriting and storytelling, etc., to make sure that people can identify themselves with the problem. So you need to focus on content. Then the second phase is explain solutions. So now you want to provide relief to your users. And then yes, there's options out there, etc. It might be a good idea to talk about your competitors as well. You need to be smart about it, but don't try to lock in your subscribers. If you want to really help them, you need to make sure that you talk about all the options that they have. And then in the last phase, this is where you really want to narrow it down and say, okay, let's do a comparison between solution A, solution B, and our solution. And obviously you want to make it in a way that's much more to your advantage, right? But each of the phases, you're going to use very different kind of channels, tactics, etc., to sort of convince the people and drive traffic at each of the phases. So that's why you need to test all of these things. Does it make sense?
I think it does. I think it's very rational thinking, or whatever you've just said. It's very, very rational, and I think like this is something people should be doing at the end of the day. We're just going to squeeze in the last question here. Now, this one is from Angela. Now, Angela's wondering, I'm running a recruitment campaign focusing on lead conversions. What would be a good practice in terms of platforms to advertise? For example, programmatic and lead gen forms, SEM and GND.
Oh, so that's so I think there's I think it's a pretty good question. It's hard to answer, to have provide a very specific answer to that right now, but I would need more context. But I guess if you're looking for conversion, like typically today, it's hard. Conversions are hard on Facebook, for instance, because there's a lot of people on Facebook. We spend more time on Facebook, but basically we don't really take actions. So I would advise you to look for sort of different channels, different kinds of channels, and there's many advertising platforms. So obviously, everybody does Facebook and Google today, but depending on, so I would not advise you to go for LinkedIn. If you have, a huge budget, you can go for LinkedIn, but be very clear that it costs a lot of money, oftentimes like 10, 12 times more than Facebook, for instance. But there's LinkedIn, there's Pinterest ads, there's you can run ads on Spotify, you can run ads on like Quora, Twitter, etc. There's a lot of different ads networks that are not as saturated as Google and Facebook, and because they're not as saturated, your cost will usually be lower, and you have more attention of the people, of the audience. Because when I go on Facebook, let's be honest, I know that I have a lot of ads, etc. So I don't even pay attention to that. On other channels where ads are not, as heavily used, I usually go to these things to actually, do something very specific. And when I have an ad, usually the numbers look better. So I would advise you to move away from the channels that are really, really saturated and investigate other means. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned if you are on a very, what I call intentional phase, you can use search engines. So typically, when you want to sell a software, if people search like Mailchimp versus MailerLite, which are two emailing software, when people search that on Google, it's very intentional, right? People are showing that they want to make a choice, and they're comparing two options. So if you're in a business where your conversion actually involves a simple choice, sometimes it's not the case, but sometimes people will actually compare you with some other option. If you're able to nail that down, running content and running ads on Google can be very very efficient. Because this is where you want to catch the attention of users who are making a purchasing decision right now, and drive them to your site so that they can take action.
All right, super. Thibaut, we're going to have to wrap things up here, but thank you so much for your insight and everything that you've brought to the table for the Singapore Marketing Fest 2020. You've been such a joy to talk to. But yes, thank you once again for coming aboard with us and Accelerate Singapore. I'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye. Connect with me. I love it. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Oh, you can actually leave your contact details in the chat box, and that way we can get in contact with you as well. So go ahead and do that. But yeah, thank you once again, and have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.
Exabytes. Grow your business online.